All right. So the final aspect of this idea of taste for discrimination is if the discrimination is coming from the motivation is from the customers. So the customers have a dislike for a certain group of people, and they don't want to interact with them. So there's a psychic price of the good that is it includes two things. So the customer cares about the price they actually pay. That's P. That's the price they actually pay. And they also care about who sells them the good or who they interact with while buying the good. And that's where this discrimination coefficient comes from. So if they don't like a certain group, it could feel as if they've paid more than they've actually paid. At least their kind of cost to them. Way to think about it. Okay, so this D sub C is the customer's discrimination coefficient. The bigger it is, the more they dislike this group. Right? So the theory is basically the customer may not like to be served by a certain race or gender, and this could be situational. Okay, so there might be some situations where they have no problem being served by a certain race or certain gender, but there might be other situations where they have a preference about this. It's also just to make this a little more general. It's also possible D could be negative. Okay, negative means that you like this group, you really want to be served by this group. Okay, so that would be another way to think of it. So instead of a discrimination, it's sort of a preference. It's sort of a liking a group more than others. Okay, that's another kind of way to think of it. So one thing we think about this is customer preferences are likely stronger for services and goods that have a face-to-face contact. So if there's not much face-to-face contact, it's kind of hard to believe that people would really care that much about who produced the good. Although in some cases, I guess nationality has become an important part when national origin has become an important part of preferences in terms of purchasing things. But excluding that idea, generally people care more about the identity of the producer if there's some kind of face-to-face contact. Okay, and so this would kind of predict that we'll see this effect more in face-to-face jobs where there's a direct salesperson or direct service provider more than we would in jobs that are at a distance or where there's no direct contact. Okay, so this could also things in things like entertainment or movies or those kind of things, again, where there's not necessarily face to face, but where you visually see the person. This could create preferences for race or gender in terms of certain roles in movies or certain things to do with sports or this kind of thing. Okay, so let's take a look. So our prediction is basically if customers have discriminatory preferences, then the discriminated group, sorry, is likely to do more behind the scenes work and to have less interaction with customers. Okay, so if the customers have some kind of preference about the race or gender of the people serving them, then we'll expect that the group that is discriminated against will be less likely to interact with them and more likely to do behind the scenes things. And we do find some research evidence that this is true. So just to give you two examples, and I'm going to talk about this in a later video, but sorry, I have a little mistake there. There's some evidence of this for blacks and Hispanics in the retail and food service. Okay, so for example, there's a research paper that was done in New York City that I'm going to talk about in a later video that found that Black and Hispanic applicants were more likely to be pushed towards jobs that were behind the scenes. So, for example, you apply for a retail sales job and they offer you a job in the stockroom, or you apply for a server job and they offer you a job in the kitchen. Okay, this kind of thing. And so, and this was not true for white testers. In white testers were actually a little bit more likely to be pushed to frontline jobs. So anyways, we'll come back to that later, but I just wanted to show you this idea here. One more piece of evidence for this, a research in Philadelphia that was, it actually discussed in your textbook, found preferential hiring for men in high-end restaurants. So in other types of restaurants, there was not a preferential hiring for men. In fact, in the lower end restaurants, there seemed to be a preferential hiring for women. These were in server positions. But in the high end restaurants, there seemed to be a preferential hiring for men. And the researchers' idea that they came up with from the evidence they could find was it seemed to be driven by customer preferences because it did not seem to depend if the person making the hiring decisions was a man or a woman. It mainly depended on the clientele of the restaurant. So just some ideas. Well, firms may also discriminate by other things, especially in frontline employees, things like looks, height, age, skin color, etc. And there's way too much research to get into here, but there definitely people have found evidence of all of these things happening in a variety of positions in lots and lots of countries. So, so again, this could be one of two things. This theory would either predict you get some kind of wage gap in frontline jobs, so you get this the vertical you get a segregation where the discriminated group is doing more low-level frontline jobs, like they're working in lower paying places, kind of like we saw I said earlier with a low with cheaper restaurants and such. The server staff may be more from the discriminated group, and then the high-end jobs will be much more likely to be from the customer preferred group. Or in the same workplace, it could end up being segregation from frontline and behind the scenes, right? So even in the high-end restaurants, you may see the preferred group as the servers and the discriminated group doing the back room, back kitchen service. Um, there's one other way to think about this, and they discuss this in your textbook a little bit. Is it could also include interaction of clients for business services. Okay, so this could also interaction of like top level executives or relatively high level clients as well. So most of the research we looked at is sort of low level stuff like working in a restaurant or retail sales, but it also could be for high level things. So if currently the majority of high level executives in companies are men, and in most regions of the country are white men, and they prefer to do business with people like themselves, so they have a preference. They're the customers because they're maybe the clients of your firm. This could give women a disadvantage in being promoted to managerial businesses or upper level management. Also true for minority groups as well. And this is especially true if the place has a culture of doing business through socializing after hours. Things like exclusive social clubs that at times have been both racial and gender discrimination in terms of membership, golf, excessive drinking, etc. So, for example, in some countries in Asia, after work drinking and socializing is a very important part of business, and this ends up being quite a strong barrier for women to be involved in this, partly because of some other roles that they have, and also because of kind of social norms related to this behavior. So again, this is an alternative where it's a customer discrimination, but in this case, it's more high level customers like business clients versus just like retail or restaurant customers.